In 1849, a British archaeologist named Austin Henry Layard pulled a clay tablet from the buried ruins of Nineveh that he could not read, could not date with confidence, and could not categorize. He wrote in his field journal that the tablet appeared to describe a city built before the flood, a city where the towers reached toward the sky, where men did not age the way men age now, where the streets were paved with a metal that did not corrode. He noted that the tablet referred to this city in the past tense, as a place that had existed and then ceased to exist. He noted that the tablet described the cause of its ending in a single word, repeated 4 times in different cuneiform variations. The word was water. Layard packed the tablet with the rest of his finds and shipped it back to London. It entered the British Museum collection and was assigned a catalog number that placed it in unsorted material. It was not displayed, it was not translated. It sat in a wooden drawer for 170 years. In 2019, a small team of 3 Assyriologists, 1 from Heidelberg and 2 from the University of Chicago, were granted access to the unsorted Nineveh material for a digitization project funded by a private European foundation. They opened the drawer. They photographed the tablet. They ran the photographs through a transliteration algorithm trained on the largest Sumerian corpus ever assembled. The algorithm flagged the tablet as anomalous. The vocabulary did not match the period the tablet was dated to. The grammatical structures were older than the layer of soil the tablet had been recovered from. The numerical notation referenced quantities and units that do not appear anywhere else in the cuneiform record. One of the translators, the senior researcher from Heidelberg, sent a private email to a colleague that was later quoted in a footnote of a journal article that was withdrawn before publication. The email contained 1 sentence. It read, "This tablet is describing them, not us. What you are about to learn is the translation that was never published. 12 codes, embedded in a single clay surface. A description of a civilization that existed on this planet before our own. A civilization more advanced than the one you are living in right now, more advanced than any society we have ever recorded. A civilization that was erased by water, deliberately and completely, in a single coordinated event that lasted less than 100 days. Stay until the end." The final code is the one the 3 translators refused to discuss with each other after they had read it. The first code is the name. In Standard Sumerian, the pre-flood inhabitants of the earth are sometimes called the Apkallu, the 7 sages, the wise ones who taught the arts of civilization to the survivors. This tablet uses a different word entirely. The word it uses translates literally as those who came before the breaking. Not before the flood, before the breaking. The distinction is critical. In the cosmology preserved in this tablet, the flood is one event among many. The breaking is something else. The breaking is described as the moment when one form of civilization was severed from another, when the chain of memory between the old world and the new was deliberately cut, when the language was changed, when the histories were rewritten, when the survivors were sent back with a controlled version of the past. The original civilization had a different name. The tablet records that name as a series of 7 syllables that cannot be cleanly transliterated into any modern phonetic system. The closest approximation the German translator could produce was Shana Ra'a Ilumin, the ones who built the height. The second code is when they lived. The tablet gives a number. The number is recorded in a unit of time that does not correspond to any Sumerian calendar unit currently understood. The translators worked the conversion 3 different ways, comparing the unit to lunar cycles, to solar cycles, and to the precessional cycle of the equinoxes that ancient cultures across the world used as their longest reliable measure of time. The most conservative reading places the founding of this civilization at 60,000 years before the flood. The middle reading places it at 120,000. The longest reading reaches back 400,000 years. All 3 readings agree on one detail. This civilization existed for a very long time before it ended, long enough to settle every continent, long enough to forget where it had started, long enough to develop technologies that we are only beginning to suspect were possible, and long enough to refine those technologies across a span of generations that makes our own brief, modern era of 2 or 3 centuries look like a single afternoon at the end of an extremely long day. The tablet does not describe their early history. It assumes the reader already knows it. The tablet only describes the end. And before we go further, I need to pause for a second, because what I'm about to tell you gets significantly darker, and I realized a while ago that some of this cannot be fully explained in a video format. The complete decoding of all 12 codes, the tablet numbers, the translated passages, the astronomical date they specified down to the degree I put it all into a written document. It's linked below, and the QR code is on your screen. Now let's continue. The third code is how they built. The tablet describes a construction method that has no parallel in any known ancient civilization. It says they did not cut stone, they softened it. The Sumerian phrase translates approximately as they made the rock obey. The implication, according to the senior translator's notes, is that this civilization possessed a technology for manipulating the hardness of stone at a level we would now describe as molecular. They could make granite flow like wet clay. They could shape blocks weighing thousands of tons by hand. They could fit those blocks together with a precision that left no gap a knife blade could enter. This is precisely the construction technique observed at certain pre-Inca sites in Peru, at Sacsayhuaman, at Ollantaytambo. At the lower courses of structures, the Inca themselves claimed they did not build, that were already there when their ancestors first arrived. The Inca said the older walls were the work of a race of giants who came before the sun. The Sumerian tablet uses similar language. It says the makers of the walls were taller than the people who came after them, and stronger, and they lived longer, and they sang to the stones. The fourth code is what they knew. The tablet lists their fields of study in descending order, from the most abstract to the most physical. First was the study of the heavens, including objects we now call planets but which the tablet calls the wandering brothers, and including other objects that are not planets that the tablet describes as fixed points of return. Second was the study of time, including a concept that translates as the layered now, suggesting they understood time as multidimensional rather than linear. Third was the study of substance, including the manipulation of matter at scales smaller than the eye of a grain of wheat. Fourth was the study of life itself, including the modification of living things and the modification of themselves. Fifth was the study of sound, which the tablet treats as engineering rather than as art. The phrase used is sound that lifts, sound that opens, sound that ends. The fifth code is how they ran their cities. The tablet is unusually specific. They did not burn anything, they did not dig for fuel, they did not dam any rivers. They drew their power from what the tablet calls the singing of the deep stone. The translators initially read this as poetic language for geothermal energy. On second reading, they revised it completely. The tablet specifies that the singing of the deep stone was not heat, it was vibration. The earth itself contains a frequency at certain depths that can be extracted and converted into usable energy by the correct instrument. This was their power source. It was inexhaustible. It was clean. It required only the proper resonance and the proper geometry of extraction. The instrument is described in enough detail that an engineer could attempt to reconstruct one from the description alone. The senior translator's marginal note reads, "We should not publish the description of the instrument. The sixth code is where they lived." The tablet names 7 primary centers, which it calls the 7 crowns of the height. 2 of them are placed in locations that no longer exist as dry land. One is a great island in the Western Ocean, in a position roughly corresponding to the mid-Atlantic ridge. One is a southern continent that overlaps with what modern geologists call Zealandia. The other 5 centers are placed where land still exists, and where modern archaeology has documented megalithic structures predating the conventional timeline. The Bolivian Altiplano, the Egyptian Delta, the Anatolian Highlands, where Göbekli Tepe was buried 12,000 years ago for reasons no archaeologist has been able to explain, the Indus Valley, and a location in Central Africa the tablet describes in detail, but that has never been excavated, because the region has been politically inaccessible for the entirety of the modern archaeological era. The 7th code is how they were organized. The tablet describes a civilization without kings. There is no word for ruler in the entire section that describes their society. Instead, the tablet uses a word that translates as the listeners. Decisions were made by listeners. The listeners were not elected. They were not appointed. They were identified, the tablet says, by their ability to hear what most could not hear. The implication, according to the translator's marginal note, is that the leadership of this civilization was selected based on a form of perception, possibly sensory, possibly something more difficult to classify, that allowed them to receive information ordinary citizens could not. The tablet does not say what they were listening to. It only says that the listeners were correct in their decisions, until they were not. There came a point when the listeners stopped hearing correctly. That point, the tablet says, is the beginning of the end. The 8th code is what they did wrong. The tablet is unusual here because most ancient flood narratives describe a moral failing, a generalized wickedness. This tablet describes a specific technical decision. The civilization, late in its history, made a choice to attempt something the tablet calls the joining. The joining is not clearly defined in the surface text. It involved combining 2 things the tablet implies were never meant to be combined. One reading suggests a biological joining. a merging of the human form with something else. Another reading suggests a dimensional joining, an attempt to merge their layer of reality with another layer detected through the study of the layered now. Whatever the joining was, it was attempted. It was partially successful, and the partial success is what triggered the response. The ninth code is what the response actually was. After the joining was detected by what the tablet calls the Watchers Above, an emergency convocation was called. The tablet names this gathering the Council of Seven Gates. Representatives arrived from outside the planet, from what the tablet describes as the parent civilization that had originally seeded this one. They examined the joining. They classified it as an unrecoverable contamination beyond any possibility of correction. They issued the decision. The civilization would be cleansed. The instrument of power would be removed and dismantled. The memory would be partially erased. A small remnant would be preserved for a restart, on the condition that they could meet 4 specific criteria. The first is genetic isolation from the joining. The second is geographical position above roughly 2,000 meters of elevation. The third is possession of a particular artifact the tablet describes by function, but does not name directly. The fourth is something the translators could not translate at all. The senior researcher's final note on the fourth criterion reads, "This fourth condition may still be active." Before we move on to the next code, stop for a second. What you just heard about code 9 is the part that changes everything. But it only makes sense when you see it written out next to the original Sumerian notation. The 4 criteria, the selection method. It's all in the document linked below. Take 5 seconds right now, grab it, and then come back. Because what comes next builds directly on it. The link is in the description. QR code is on your screen. The 10th code is how the cleansing was done. The tablet does not describe rain. It does not describe rising rivers. It does not describe storms gathering over the horizon. It describes the deliberate inversion of a geological condition that had been engineered and maintained for tens of thousands of years. The civilization, the tablet says, had built its lowest infrastructure not on the surface but beneath the ocean floor, in vast chambers carved into the bedrock at depths where the water pressure had been actively controlled by the technology of the singing stone. The cleansing was achieved by removing that control in a single coordinated act. The chambers were opened. The water came in not from above but from below, surging upward through cavity networks that had been sealed for the entire span of the civilization's existence. The cities along the coasts were taken first, swallowed within hours. The cities in the interior were taken by a secondary mechanism, which the tablet describes as the moving of the ice. Vast quantities of ice that had been stable for an age were destabilized by what the tablet calls the harmonic strike, a single coordinated sonic event tuned to the molecular structure of frozen water. The ice fell. The melt followed. The interior continents were drowned by runoff that traveled at speeds the tablet records as faster than a galloping horse. The entire process, beginning to end, took less than 100 days. The Younger Dryas climate event, dated by modern science to approximately 12,800 years ago, lines up with this description with an accuracy that has caused several mainstream geologists to quietly revise their working models in the last 15 years. The geological signatures match. The sediment layers match. The mass extinction event of the large mammals across North America matches. The sudden appearance of nanodiamonds in the soil layer corresponding to that exact period matches. The tablet's description of a vapor cloud that blocked the sun for nearly a decade after the cleansing matches the recently identified period of atmospheric cooling that climatologists cannot fully account for using any natural mechanism. The 11th code is who survived the cleansing. The tablet records the remnant by category rather than by individual name, in keeping with its general preference for systems over personalities. A small group on the high plateau in what is now South America, who would later be remembered in Andean tradition as the founders sent by the creator god Viracocha, the bearded white man who walked across the highlands teaching agriculture, masonry, and astronomy, before walking out into the Western Ocean and disappearing. A small group in the eastern Anatolian mountains, who would later become the builders of the buried temple complex at Göbekli Tepe and the related sites at Karahan Tepe and Sayburk, all of which sit at elevations consistent with the second criterion. A small group on the volcanic plateau of East Africa, in a region the tablet describes by reference to a specific lake that, when matched to modern topography, corresponds to the highlands above Lake Turkana. A small group on the Iranian plateau, in the region the Persians would later call the high country of the first king, the original throne of the legendary pre-flood ruler Kayumars. And a single vessel, which the tablet describes in terms that do not match the wooden ark narrative we inherited from the later Hebrew and Babylonian traditions. The vessel was not made of wood. The vessel was not built by hand. the vessel was provided. It was provided to a specific individual whose name the tablet records as Ziusudra, the same name preserved in the Sumerian king list, the same individual remembered in Babylonian tradition as Utnapishtim, the same individual remembered in Hebrew tradition as Noah. The vessel carried him, his immediate family, and a sealed library. The library is the most important detail in this entire section. It contained, the tablet says, a complete record of the civilization that had just been ended, preserved on materials that the tablet describes as harder than stone and lighter than wood. The materials do not match any substance currently known to ancient world archaeology. The 12th code is what they left behind. The tablet says the library was eventually deposited in 3 separate locations to prevent its total loss to any single future catastrophe. The first deposit is described as the high cave above the desert in the land of the 2 rivers, which corresponds to a region of northern Iraq that has never been systematically explored due to ongoing political instability across multiple decades. The second deposit is described as the chamber beneath the Lion of Stone, which corresponds to a specific location at Giza, where seismic surveys conducted in the early 1990s by a Japanese research team detected void spaces and corridor structures that the Egyptian Antiquities Authority has consistently refused permission to investigate, citing structural concerns that no independent engineer has ever been allowed to verify. The third deposit is described as the southern continent, beneath the ice, in a region that we now call Antarctica, in a position the tablet specifies by stellar alignment with such precision that the 3 translators were able to convert the alignment to modern coordinates and produce a single point on the modern map. They have not released the coordinates. They have refused multiple requests to share even the approximate region. The senior translator's final note in the working file, written in pencil in the margin of the page where the coordinates appear, is a single sentence. It reads, "If anyone goes looking, they should know the door was not designed to be opened by us." The tablet, after the 2019 translation work concluded, was returned to its drawer in the unsorted Nineveh collection. The journal article that referenced it was withdrawn before publication, at the formal request of the European Foundation that had funded the digitization project. The 3 translators returned to their universities. The senior researcher from Heidelberg took early retirement in 2021, citing health reasons, and has not given an interview to any academic or popular publication since. The other 2 have remained at their academic posts, but have published nothing on the Nineveh material since the project ended, and have declined every request for comment on the digitization findings. In 2023, a private inquiry was filed with the British Museum requesting access to the tablet for independent verification by a credentialed Assyriologist working outside the original team. The request was denied. The reason given was that the tablet's catalog number could not be located within the active database, that the object may have been transferred to long-term storage at a different facility, that the matter was under internal review, and would remain so until further notice. Subsequent inquiries from at least 2 other institutions have received identical responses. The civilization the tablet describes existed. The evidence is in the architecture we cannot replicate even with our heaviest modern equipment, blocks of stone fitted with millimeter precision that no current technology can reproduce at scale. The evidence is in the genetic studies that keep finding contamination from sources that, according to our official timeline, should not exist within the human lineage. The evidence is in the sites we cannot date because the dating methods break down beyond a certain depth, where the carbon signal goes flat and the strata refuse to align with any conventional sequence. The evidence is in the flood narratives that appear in every culture on every inhabited continent with details too specific and too consistent to be coincidence. The Hopi remember it. The Aboriginal Australians remember it. The Maori remember it. The Inuit remember it. The Maya remember it with mathematical precision. The Sumerians wrote it down 4,000 years ago, and now we know they were copying from a source much older than themselves. The corroborating sites continue to surface. The submerged structures off the coast of Yonaguni in Japan, dated by their continental shelf position to a period when the surrounding seabed was dry land, sit at depths consistent with a sea level rise that occurred too fast to be naturally explained. The megalithic platform at Baalbek in Lebanon, with foundation stones weighing over 1,000 tons each, sits beneath 3 layers of later construction, none of which match the precision of the layer beneath them. Each new site that emerges adds another entry to a list mainstream archaeology has refused to integrate into a single coherent timeline, because the only timeline that fits all of them is the one written on the tablet in the locked drawer. There is also the recent matter of what has happened with the original photographs. The 2019 imaging files of the Nineveh tablet which were stored on a secure server at the foundation that funded the digitization project, were deleted in late 2022. The Foundation's official statement, issued only after a researcher in Switzerland filed a public records request, was that the files had been corrupted by a hardware failure and that no backup had been retained. No backup. Of the highest resolution photographs ever taken of the most anomalous tablet in the British Museum collection. The senior researcher from Heidelberg, when contacted by the Swiss researcher for comment, replied with a single line by email. The line read, "Sometimes the loss of evidence is itself the evidence. They built higher than we have built. They knew more than we know. They reached further than we have reached. And they were ended in less than 100 days because they did something they were warned not to do." The tablet does not say the warning has been issued again. The tablet does not say the criteria for selection are inactive. The tablet only says, in its final preserved line, that the cycle is older than this turn of it. The cycle has happened before. The cycle will happen again. The only real question is which of the 4 criteria you happen to meet, and which side of the next cleansing you will be standing on when the chambers beneath the ocean floor are opened a second time. The drawer in London is still locked. The door beneath the ice is still buried. The library is still down there, waiting for someone with the correct artifact, the correct elevation, the correct genetic line, and the 4th criterion that nobody alive today understands. The water came once. The water knows the way back. And somewhere in a London storage room, a 7,000-year-old clay tablet sits in a wooden drawer, describing in detail exactly how it will happen the next time, while the people who finished translating it have decided, all 3 independently, never to speak of it again.